President Donald Trump's tariffs have caused chaos in global markets, with stock markets in the US, Europe and Asia plunging. The S&P 500 saw its biggest loss since 2020, dropping 4.8%, while the Nasdaq fell 6% and Dow Jones dropped 4%. Trump remained defiant, insisting that the US economy will come out stronger. He claimed that the US is undergoing a massive economic restructuring. Countries are already responding to Trump's tariff, with Canada announcing a 25% tariff on US auto imports that don't comply with trade agreement standards. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum has welcomed her country's exemption from Trump's latest tariffs. She credited Mexico's good for the exclusion, which is crucial for Mexico as dependent on trade with the United States. Sheinbaum also stressed the importance of maintaining strong bilateral trade ties. Let's listen in to what Prime Minister Carney and Sheinbaum had to say.
And today I'm announcing that the Government of Canada will be responding by matching the U.S. approach, with 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States that are not compliant with CUSMA, our North American Free Trade Agreement, and on the non-Canadian content of CUSMA-compliant vehicles from the United States as well. Our tariffs, though, unlike the U.S. tariffs, will not affect auto parts.
En el caso de México, pues no hay aranceles adicionales, y eso es bueno.
Additionally, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba called the tariffs a national crisis and said the government is working hard to minimize the impact. He urged a calm-headed approach in negotiations with the United States. Ishiba ordered his ministers to closely study the tariffs and consider supporting domestic industries and jobs. Japan's government also expressed serious concerns about whether the new tariffs comply with international trade agreements. The IMF has cautioned these tariffs represent a significant risk to the global economic outlook, with possible negative impacts on global trade. We are now joined by Jajit Bhattacharya, President of the CDEPR. Thank you very much for joining us. Jajit, what can you tell us about the impact that these tariffs are going to have throughout the world, from the east to the west?
On an immediate basis, what has already happened is on the US Wall Street, the losses are almost equal to 1% of the total GDP of US. So you have already seen significant impact happening in terms of the impact of the tariffs. Estimates coming out, there is going to be an impact of 10% of the median income of Americans in terms of increased cost per household. And that's quite significant, 10% of the median income. So the estimate is $3,800 and the median income is $40,000. That's a humongous amount of impact that's going to happen. Now that's the impact on US households, and it's going to be worse as more steps are being taken by the Trump administration to support whatever their larger objective is. Its repercussions on other economies is also going to feed back into the US economy. And what I mean by that is because there will be an increase in cost of living in US, the consumption in US will go down, which means that they will be importing less from other countries, which means that other countries will also have a depressed output, which means that they will have less income and less consumption, which will then feed back into what US is exporting to the rest of the world. So it's going to go into a spiral if we are not able to undo some of the damage that has the tariffs coming in.
Yes.
I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel in the short run because these are complex negotiations that will be happening.
Jajit, some people, economists, are calling this the biggest thing to happen in trade, in global trade, in nearly 75 years. What are the possible responses for the world leaders, and chief economists in these countries hardest hit by these tariffs? We've obviously just seen Mark Carney respond with a counter tariff of that exact 25%. What choices do countries face to this?
Yeah, in fact, it's the worst occurrence not in 75 years, but roughly 95 years, because the last Great Depression happened about 95 years back and was again tariffs being put in, which has not been thought through. So, again, US is an independent sovereign country, so I would not be commenting around what their larger sovereign goals are. But the manner and speed in which it's being done, the global economy is not a machine or a computer that you change things at one end and immediately is going to give a response at the other side, and immediately capacities will relocate to US. It takes 5 years, 6 years, a decade for a shift in supply chain. And in the meantime, if the supply chains are disrupted, it's going to pain everyone, because there is no magic involved in supply chains being resettled. In terms of what are the response of other leaders, obviously people are having an angst on it. Some are responding with reciprocal tariffs. For example, Canada has mentioned that they will be responding with reciprocal tariffs, which is going to exacerbate the situation. Others are handling it in a more nuanced manner. They're talking about a reciprocal tariff in the open, but trying to work out through track two mechanisms through which we can bring back some semblance of normalcy. Also, one of the key issues to look at is how as it is now well known, the tariffs that the US government had accused that other nations are putting X number of tariffs. Tariff is coming from the ratio of the trade deficit over the total imports coming from that country. Now that is not tariff. So, which just means that even if the tariff per se is reduced, but there is still more exports coming from other countries into US. So US mechanism of looking at tariffs, that will still show up. Also, what is surprising is that countries where US has got a trade surplus, they have still gone ahead and put in a tariff on them. The reason why it's surprising is that the calculation still held. The positive for US was used at import coming from the other country, and it was put, and therefore half of it was. So it's quite perplexing in terms of done, expecting from other countries. How should other countries respond to this? And these are all perplexing questions, and there is no clarity because the administration has not provided any calculation.
Jayjet Bhattacharya, some very informative insight there. Thank you very much for joining us. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has been removed from office. The Constitutional Court upheld his impeachment over his decision to impeach, which caused a political crisis. A new presidential election must be held within 60 days. Until then, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will serve. The court said Yoon violated his duty and called his martial law decree a serious challenge to democracy. His actions created chaos in South and foreign policy. Let's listen in.
법치국가 원리와 민주국가 원리의 기본 원칙들을 위반한 것으로 질서를 정화정의 안정성에 위해를 끼쳤습니다. 재판관 전원 의견으로 주문을 선고합니다. 선고 시각을 확인하겠습니다. 지금 시각은 오전 11시 22분입니다. 피청구인 윤석열을 파면.
Supporters of Yoon reacted angrily, while anti-Yoon protesters said the court rejected Yoon is also facing a criminal trial, including insurrection charges. The crisis started when he declared the opposition's party's alleged abuse of parliamentary. The decree was lifted after a few hours. The court rejected Yoon's defense that martial law was necessary and that it lacked legal justice. Markets stayed stable after the ruling. Authorities are now preparing for the election. Yoon's party has accepted the court's verdict, while opposition leader Lee Jae-myung praised the decision. Acting President Han vowed to ensure a smooth election process after Yoon's removal. Let's listen in to what Han Duck-soo, South Korea's acting president, said.
헌정사상 두 번째로 현직 국가 원수의 탄핵이라는 불행한 상황이 발생한 것을 무겁게 생각합니다. 주권자인 국민 여러분의 뜻을 받들어 헌법률에 따라 다름 없이 출범할 수 있도록 자기 대통령 선거 관리에 최선을